So let's talk about the Boston Celtics because a lot of conversations that have gone around since the return of Jason Tatum that Boston should be considered the favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference and challenge the likes of OKC, the Spurs, Nuggets to make the NBA Finals or Minnesota because I still think Minnesota has a shot to make it. And as a Celtics fan, I'm already ecstatic with how this season has gone. I've said it in previous videos that having a center in Kata develop into a reliable piece has been one of the biggest success stories of Boston this year. Because if you think about it, you go back to last summer, they had to trade away Porzingis, Al Horford walked in the offseason, and you're left with a lot of question marks about your front court. Well, Kata filled that need, and it's been a huge boost for their front court presence. But their backup is Garza, who has been serviceable. He's really good at shooting the three ball, at getting offensive rebounds. Now, rim protection is not his strength. So I like what Joe Mazzulla has done with utilizing the role players and getting the best out of them in the regular season. But I do have some concerns when it comes to the overall roster of this Celtics team. When you look back at last year, you had guys like Drew Holiday, you had Kristaps Porzingis, who brought a lot of versatility to this roster, and Al Horford as well, where Al Horford, he could shoot the three. He could guard people in space. Not always successfully, but he was a really good piece for that Celtics team. Drew Holiday could guard somebody at the point of attack. He could shoot the ball. He could play make. He could do a little bit of everything. And then you have Porzingis. I know he wasn't always healthy, but he was a phenomenal rim protector, and he could also shoot the ball. He could score in the post. When you look at the guys for Boston right now, Hugo Gonzalez, scrappy guy. Is he a knockdown three-point shooter? Not yet. He's still a rookie. He's going to develop. I think Hugo will be really good for Boston going forward. You look at a guy like Ron Harper Jr., he has showed some flashes of promise. You look at a guy like Jordan Walsh, who had, some promise early on. Joe Mazzulla benched him in the Sacramento game. He hasn't gotten a bigger role since. You look at Baylor Shireman. He's a great knockdown shooter. He's respectable on defense, but I'm not scared of him if I'm going to go at him in the playoffs. So you look at the overall roster of Boston, Brown, Jason Tatum, Derek White, and Pritchard have to carry the bulk of these flaws to try and get Boston over the hump. So I got to cover some things up. Last year, you had Drew Holiday, you had Al Horford, you had Porzingis. Those guys are better than the fourth or say fifth, sixth, and seventh guys on these rosters. So in my opinion, I do believe the talent gap could show up in the playoffs, especially you see Jason Tatum, he's still ramping up. We could see another year of him just getting healthy, getting that confidence back where he's back to being Jason Tatum. That's okay. But if you look at, their record against the top 10 teams in point differential, they are 6-14 against those teams. So they struggle against more talented opponents. So if you go into the playoffs where the roster where you don't have the same type of talent as you did last year, there are cause for concerns. Look, could Boston still make the NBA Finals? Of course they can. You have to expect that Tatum will get more reps, he'll get healthier, and he'll be at probably 85% by the time we get to the playoffs. But can Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Jason Tatum, Sam Hauser, and Pritchard hide these flaws that Boston has up and down the roster? Because remember, Kata, yes, he's your starting center, but he hasn't been in a playoff environment where he's going to be relied upon to rim protect, rebound. I'm not saying he can't do these things, but you still need the experience. And I think we're missing that as Celtics fans. Look, I'm not trying to downplay Boston. All I'm saying is when it comes to the season itself, they've been fantastic because of the culture, because of Brad Stevens and Joe Mazzulla. This is a great organization. I expect the Celtics to bounce back very quick. I thought it might take them 2 years because of Tatum's health and the lack of front court where they have to load off some guys and find the depth. But Kata is going to be a solid starting center for years to come. So that's a huge W. But this is first rodeo where he's your starting center. Then you look at a guy like Baylor Shireman. Is he going to be reliable in the playoffs? What if he has a regression? Look, there's going to be a role player on this roster that's going to have regression. Vucevic, he hasn't been that good in the playoffs. So there are question marks about the depth of the Celtics team. So when I look at a matchup against the Knicks, I know people will pick Boston. I get it. But the Knicks just beat them last year. I know people throw the injury excuse, but the Knicks were up 2 games to 1, they had, I believe, a 10-point lead late in that fourth quarter when Tatum had the Achilles injury, and they were going to go down 3 games to 1. The Knicks outplayed them up to that point. They came back down 20 points in game 1 and game 2. Boston blew those games fully loaded. I know Porzingis had his weird sickness going on. However, at the same time, the Knicks won that series and they have a lot of confidence. I know people say, well, they've never been to the NBA Finals. It's the same narrative we said about Denver, Boston, OKC. You have to prove it, right? So I understand that argument, but the Knicks have been battle tested. They've been in the playoffs. And when I look at their roster, you look at their fifth, sixth, and seventh option, I would argue they're better than Boston's fifth, sixth, and seventh option because these are guys who are just hustling out there, trying to get a roster spot for next season because I don't think Garza is going to be back next year. I don't know what they're going to do with the logjam of small forwards they have because you still need more front court. And they have Hauser, Hugo, Jordan Walsh, Baylor Shireman, Jason Tatum. They can't play everybody, and Sam Hauser. So that's a huge list of small forwards. So you know they're going to make a move this offseason. So some unknowns there. And then you look at the Knicks, they have some great pieces. Look, I get the reservations because you can go after Jalen Brunson and Cat and really expose them in the playoffs because they're not your best defenders, and that's understandable. But I just feel like the Eastern Conference is going to come down to Cleveland. It's going to come down to Boston and New York and Detroit. I think it's a toss-up. I don't think we can just say, oh, the Celtics are going to make the NBA Finals. I think it's going to be a difficult path. There's going to be some really hard-fought games. And the margin of error when you're going up against the best players is very slim. And then when you have a Jason Tatum who's still ramping up and has to get healthy, there are some cause for concerns because what if he doesn't reach the 80, 85% and he can't, get by his guy on maybe not a consistent basis, but every other play, or he can, drive downhill and have that confidence to break down the defense successfully. Well, what do you do there? You're going to put more pressure on Jaylen Brown and Derek White to carry that load. And then teams will just leave Tatum on an island. I've seen games where Tatum sits in the corner. Now, I still think he should be facilitating, orchestrating the offense instead of him watching in the corner. But teams might say, look, we're going to double Jaylen Brown and make Tatum beat us. That might happen. So it's going to be a very interesting playoffs for the Celtics because they don't have the same talent as they did last year. Like I said before, I am more than happy with what's happened up to this point. I know people on the Boston meter are saying it's championship or bust now. I'm not there. This is a gap year, it's supposed to be, and they're battling for the second seed in the Eastern Conference. That is a huge win, and I keep saying it over and over again. Having a reliable center in Kata has been the biggest win for Boston because imagine if Kata was a bust or he didn't pan out like they expected. Now you have a front court problem that you have to address this offseason. And then you have another situation where it's like, man, we need 2 centers because Garza, he's serviceable, but he's not going to stay forever. So you might go into next season having to build chemistry with Tatum Brown and Pritchard. You got a guy in Kata who's been around the organization, and now he's getting a bigger role. Shout out to the Boston development team. I love what they've done with bringing in young guys. Shireman, again, he's showing promise, and I wonder, are they going to keep him or keep Hauser? They got to figure out who's going to stay between Hauser, Shireman, and I believe it's going to be Hugo Gonzalez or Jordan Walsh. That's a logjam they got to, figure out. I would keep Jordan Walsh because he's 22 and I think he still has some upside. That's just my personal opinion. But they're going to have to trade a few of these guys to get another backup big. And I believe they do need a point of attack defender at the guard position. I love Peyton Pritchard. He's a bucket getter, but he's not the best defender. But that's not his strength, and that's okay. All in all, this has been a great season for the Boston Celtics. No matter what happens in the playoffs, I'm not overreacting. I'm not going to be disappointed if they lose in the second round or they lose in the conference finals. Heck, if they lose in the NBA finals, I don't want to see that, obviously. I'd rather just lose in the second round. But what I'm saying is I think next year they're going to be back with a vengeance. Tatum's going to have an offseason to ramp up even more. And then Brad Stevens has an entire offseason to cook up a trade, bring in a couple pieces. And I believe Boston will be right back in the NBA Finals next year. That's how confident I am in this team because you've seen the leap of Jaylen Brown. He has been a first-team All-NBA player this year. And Joe Mazzulla as a coach taking less talent and having them battle for a top 2 seed shows me they are in good hands, and going forward, Boston is going to be a problem for years to come. Hope you guys enjoyed my thoughts about the state of the Boston Celtics, and what are your expectations going into the playoffs? Will you be disappointed if they don't reach the mountaintop this year? Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.